Welcome to the final chapter of designing outdoor living space using SoftPlan. Over the course of the previous 9 chapters, we have focused on deck design, patio design, inputting topography for the site through the use of shot points so that we could get different slopes to the yard. We have imported custom symbols and we have designed using symbols within SoftPlan a custom kitchen. We've also gone in and designed a custom wall that would allow us to put a screen porch. And so once the design is complete, at this stage, what we want to do is basically bring this to a full conclusion with a higher rendered or textured image, something that we could possibly print off and hand to the client. And this is going to involve things like texture assignments and the modification of textures, the addition of light sources, and just some fine tuning of the work that we have done. And so to begin with, we'll begin with just what it takes to assign a texture within SoftPlan. And so with the model in front of us at this point, you can select the edit and from here simply go to surface edit. And when you select this and position your cursor on a surface within SoftPlan, such as the siding, and click, it's going to pull up the texture assignment menu for you. Now the texture assignment menu will give you a preview of what this is going to look like, and as you click on the texture/color tab, it's going to show you the listing of textures or the folders that they're stored in, and then even give you a selection of textures down below. And from this list, you'll be able to go in and assign different sizes or shapes for the texture. In this case, siding, which could be either horizontal or vertical, or could be even a different shape altogether, something like a cedar, a shingle. And you'll also be able to pick from this the various color textures that are there. These are simple JPEGs, and so with access to various manufacturers online, you'll also be able to go in and import your own so that you can fully customize the model. As you're looking at the texture assignment, and I move into the options, it's important to understand what some of these settings are going to do for you. The horizontal and vertical distances that you see here can be set to either stretch the texture horizontally or vertically and to cover more space. In essence, a texture is mapped across the surface to cover it, and so in this case, this bitmap or this JPEG will cover 2'8" by 1'4", and I could certainly stretch that by setting the dimensions on it. As I move down the list here, the ambient, which is a slider bar that will allow this to be increased or lowered, but as I change that, it's going to either increase or decrease the brightness of the texture. The diffuse will control, again on a slider bar, whether or not this texture has a shiny or matte finish. And so again, just depending on which way we slide that slider bar. The specular can be used to basically increase or decrease the amount of visible highlights in a texture. So a brick pattern, which has many different colors and textures in it, you could increase the specular to increase the highlights and options there. The opacity will actually control the transparency of the texture. So in the case of the siding, which we're currently editing right now, we would not want that opacity lower than 100. Siding is not transparent whatsoever. But in the case of the glass in the windows, that transparency may be set at 15 or 20%, which gives the illusion of glass being there. However, you want to have it transparent to see into the house. Now, in the case of our remodel, at some point we may want to come in and actually increase the transparency on these windows. And we would do that because at this stage, what happens inside these rooms is not important to our outdoor living space. And so we don't want to be distracted by the fact that this is a large empty room with possibly no ceiling board. So if we were to shade the glass a dark gray, for example, you couldn't see into the house, but you could still get the visible impression that there's windows, in this wall. So that's where you could play around by increasing the opacity on the glass. When you get to the relief depth, as you set this value, the texture is basically analyzed, and for all intents and purposes, indentations are simulated on the surface to create the illusion of depth. So as we're looking once again at the stone here, or at the block, or if there were brick on this house, as I increase the relief depth, it's going to give a greater level of depth perspective to us on the actual model itself. And then reflectivity, again, by enabling this and then increasing the slider bar as I turn it on, okay, will create a reflection in the actual surface that I'm modifying. So not something we would do with siding. But if we go back to, the windows that we have here, or if there was a swimming pool out here with water, then we may go in and turn the reflectivity on for the glass or the water. We may increase that reflectivity to 25 or 30, which would then allow us to see the reflection of either the trees or the house in the water, etc. Okay, so in this case, I'm just going to turn that off. Lastly, the emissive option in terms of the slider bars allows you to control how much light is actually emitted from the texture itself. So this is useful for things like light bulbs and light fixtures. And in fact, I've even used it, or you can even use it from the perspective of lighting a ceiling a little bit if you find it's a little bit dark, just to brighten it up and have a little bit of light emitted to it to get that white finish that you're looking for. As you're looking at the texture map box that we got, where we have box, orthographic, cylindrical, and then finally spherical, this is going to control when the texture is applied to that surface, how it's going to be mapped onto it. And so in our case, orthographic is probably going to be used more often than not. And so that's what we'll leave that on there for right now. But depending on the shape that it was being mapped to, you could certainly have a texture stretched around a box or cylindrical type shape. As I move down into the options, we've got an auto orient, which will automatically stretch the horizontal grain of the texture across the longest edge of the object or where it's being applied. And then you can go in after that fact and even rotate it if you want it to go in the opposite direction. Okay, so it'll actually rotate by 90 degrees. The invert will actually flip it 180 degrees. So if you have in some cases where you may use this, you have signage on a surface, and so when you scanned it in and you applied it to the surface for the signage, it's actually reading backwards. Then you just simply edit it and invert it, and it will flip it 180 degrees. Scaling would actually stretch the texture across the entire surface, and so when you instead of that JPEG, mapping with a 2'8" by 1'4" horizontal and vertical shape, it would just simply take that and stretch it across the entirety of this surface here, and so the siding, would be distorted in our case. But if you think to something like a rug, you don't want that being arrayed across the rug or a picture hanging on the wall. You simply want to stretch the image to fill the surface of the picture. So moving forward then, to change textures, we can go into the to the texture option, and we could simply select from the list of sidings that are there, and it would go ahead and it would apply that siding. And you'll see, if I just go through and select from the various options that are there, it will apply that siding there. And if you don't want to show the texture, but you want the color applied, as I selected on this vinyl mint texture that's here, when I select the display texture, the JPEG is actually turned off, if you will, and only the color is applied. So you don't see the texture, you simply just see the color being matched to that texture itself. Now, as I scroll down this list of textures that are here, again, I could go into the manufacturer list that's there, and you've got a host of manufacturers, and then I could go into the SoftPlan Plus. And the SoftPlan Plus will give me access into the various siding options that are available. So in this case here, you can see that we've got various textures or sidings that are available according to the manufacturer that has shipped them. And as we take a look at these, they're going to map on, and they're at a very high resolution as far as they're concerned. And so again, I could move down through the various textures that are there. And even this is a siding wall, but when you defined the wall, you didn't define whether it was vertical or horizontal siding. It was simply just drawn as a siding wall. And so here I could come in and select from the vertical patterns that are there to see exactly what this would look like if it were a vertical option. And so I'm just going to come in, and you can see I could adjust the ambient on this to actually make it darker in nature, or select different textures and so on, just simply to apply. And so in my case, I'm going to go with something that's a little more gray with a little bit of grain in it for the actual house. Once this has been applied, I can then go to the options, and this is where I can then begin to apply with the ambient, which, as I said, controls the color itself. And then as I move to the diffuse, whether this has a matte finish or whether this is going to have a shiny finish, and again, you can just simply pick that slider bar where you want it to go, and it's going to adjust it on the fly for us to see there. As far as the specular is concerned, not a lot of highlights on this, and so I'm not overly concerned about this, and it's also not going to be set up to have any kind of transparency. So in this case, once this has been set, I'll click OK and have it assigned, and we can then simply, I'm just pressing the mouse wheel down and adjusting on the fly. For the block wall, I'm actually going to apply the stone texture that's here. So rather than doing a surface edit and selecting this, I can select Edit, Surface Copy Paste, select the stone, and I'm going to select the wall. And I'll just simply have the same texture applied to that wall on the back. And so in this case here, this is where now we can start to get in, and we can begin to, through the surface edit, we can see what the texture looks like, and as we come down, you can see the relief depth has been set to 20. And so long as relief depth as a whole is turned on for the model, this will be applied. So what I mean by that is, as I click OK here and I go into Options and I select Mode Options, currently I'm working in the textured mode, and so as I go to face options here, you'll see that relief depth has been enabled. If I turn that off, you'll see how this gets a much flatter feel per se on the model itself. And so once again, turning the relief depth on, it's going to give it a little more depth as far as the model is concerned. And so the higher that value is, the greater the relief depth. Now, as we move towards the actual deck itself, and so just simply clicking the Zoom to Surface command, and then clicking on the stair, and now a combination of just using the arrow keys, I'm going to come in and just make some changes to the model itself. And so in this case here, I'm just going to adjust and move my patio just a little bit so that we've actually got ourselves set up that it's running right down to the stair. And so right clicking, I can click on the actual riser of the stair. We can see stairs, riser, deck stair finish. And when I click on this, I can go to texture, and I'm actually going to remove, I'm not even going to use the texture on this, but instead just simply come in and select the color option to apply that to be white. And so as you can see now, instead of using that texture, I'm actually, have this as a white almost finish atop the actual wood that we're using there. And so the same thing could be done for the treads. I could click on the stair tread, come into options, or come into the texture color and to select the display color, and in this case I'll select gray. And so now what we have is we've actually set ourselves up to have a gray tread with more of a white finish going up. And so from here, this is where I can now use my surface copy paste to click on the treads. And in the case of the risers, just to get a little more finish to this, I could come in and I could turn the ambient up on this to make it brighter. And so as we are looking at this now, I can just simply, using the same surface copy paste, I could click to apply that to the outside edge of the deck itself. And so this is just a matter now of modifying or applying what we want to have as far as our options on our deck. And so in this case here, I've applied this all the way around to the various posts. And then in the case of the handrails, we'll do the same thing, and as well as the toe rails. For the spindles themselves, I'm just going to surface edit this spindle and come into the texture pattern, and again, we're just picking from our options that are available, and as I do so, have that applied. And so very quickly we can go through now and just simply apply textures in that same sort of format to the actual deck that we're working with here. And as you can see, we've actually got our deck boards up here. Now, you don't have to just assign colors. I can come in through the surface edit on this, and we can see that right now we're dealing with a wood texture, and we've got the various options that are available. And again, I can go back to the manufacturer, and as I scroll down and into the SoftPlan Plus, I'll be able to find the various options, of which you can also go in and modify and assign your own. So in this case here, I'm just going to take a look at what we have for different decking options that we could use. And so you can see at this stage now, by adding that gray texture, I now have that texture assigned to my actual model. And so I could go through until I find the texture that I'm looking to assign to this. And keep in mind, you can always go in and assign the brightness or lower it down if it's not quite the color that you're looking for. And so just continuing with this, I'm just going to go in and assign a different texture altogether. And once I found what I'm looking for, and then I will do the same thing, whereby I will do a surface copy paste of this on the outside, but I'm going to edit this one and come in and just assign a much higher ambient to give a little bit of difference in terms of the colors being used on the actual boards themselves. And so we now have our gray and white and black deck, okay, that's going on here. And these things are so easy to change because, again, if you see fit that you want to, I just decided to let's match the outside perimeter with what we're using underneath. I can get that assigned. And keep in mind, you're making the changes on one deck, the changes are being applied to the other as well. So that's the kind of the beauty of doing it here. And so just moving ahead, I'll pick the dark gray to assign to the post and the joists, but then I may come in and do a surface copy paste of the white wood texture and apply that to the actual joists and overhead boards, just to give a little bit of a difference. And so as we do this, and so at this stage I'm going to do a surface edit on our patio, and I will just come into the listing of textures that are here. I'm going to go back again into my manufacturers and open up my SoftPlan Plus, and now I can come into what we've got for for our different stones that are available, and from here I could begin to take a look to see if I can find something that maybe suits what we're doing for a patio much better than what I already have in there. And so from the list of different textures that are there, you can see I've been able to find something that's a little more gray, and not quite as symmetrical as what we had. I will also be able to go in and increase that relief depth to give it a bit of depth on the outside. And so as we begin to look at this now, we can see what our patio is now looking like. And so we've got our all of our textures assigned at this stage. And so heading towards the finale of this, we're going to come in and we're going to select options, and we're going to go to the mode options. Now, as you're looking at the various options that are available in the as far as the modes are concerned, some of the things that you can change here are going to increase, the level of detail in the actual plan itself. For example, anti-aliasing. As I increase this number, it's going to increase the crispness and the level of detail on the model itself. And so the lower this number, it could be argued almost the grainier that the model is going to be. However, the higher this number is taken, the more detail that is going to be able to be seen as far as the model is concerned. And so as I increase this, I can see that the textures almost pop from there. As we go into face options, we talked about the relief depth, which we've already got enabled on our mulch, and notice that with the fit to site, the mulch even has already is actually kind of flowing with the site itself. And so those types of things actually give you that depth perspective that you're looking for. If I turn on reflections, that would be the time that I would want to go and assign the reflections to the glass texture. It would slow down the model. So for right now, I'm not going to do that. When I go to the background, this is where I can come in and actually assign a background, image to the model itself, and so you can begin to see things like skies and and so on to the background of the model, just depending on what it is that you're trying to create. And this is where you could actually use, the 3D trees to set up the framing of the model itself, so that you just don't have sky necessarily in the background. And so in that case there, I would probably go ahead and add a few trees and so on, just framing around the model. And so I've just had a few of those put in at this point. Clicking on back into the mode options itself, when we go into the lighting, this is where we can get in and begin to modify. Now the ambient lighting itself is going to control the overall brightness of the model. As you increase this, it basically artificially brightens the model for you. As I move down to the ambient occlusion, this is actually going to go in and give more realistic shading to the model while using the ambient lighting. So again, they work in conjunction with one another. The headlight is best described as a point light located above the camera, or where you're actually looking from. And so as you show or look at this, it's going to light your view without actually casting shadows on the location that you're viewing. Okay, as we move down into the indirect lighting and turning it on, at this stage now you're going to have both a direct contribution of lights and indirect, depending on light sources within the model itself, and you can certainly control that once again using the slider bar with how much the model is going to be lit. And the best thing that for lighting really comes down to using actual light sources on the model, or controlling things like the sun. And so moving from with shadows turned on, and I'm going to click OK and select the sun option. Now the sun option is going to allow me to go in and specify time of day, and so if I come in and I change this to, that went to 10 p.m. versus say 10 a.m., which is then going to begin to brighten the model, and I can even brighten the sun itself. And so as I go in modifying things like time of day and even time of year, we're going to be able to see how shadows are going to be cast as far as the backyard is concerned. And this is a very important thing, in particular as you're designing your outdoor living space. Individuals are going to want, your clientele are going to want to see perhaps if a pool is going to be shaded at different types or different times of the day, etc., within the model. And so, in all, once you have gotten all of your settings set, at that stage, you would then be able to go through and output the model, and you could even output the file size that you want it, saved to, and then allow it to go in and create or capture that. Once we have a camera angle that we want to see, what we would want to do at that stage is come in and change it to the ray trace mode. And the ray trace mode would actually then go in and calculate a high-end image for us, something that you could print off and hand to the client or email and send to them. The ray tracer at this stage will go through and make hundreds of passes on this while factoring in shadows, depth perception, as well as how the different light sources and textures interact with one another. Once ray traced, it can be seen how much clearer the image is, much higher quality at this stage. Things like reflections of the trees in the windows, that's nothing more than what we just talked about, whereby on the actual texture or the color that was assigned, the opacity was increased from a 30 to a 70 with the reflectivity added in. Finally, the last item that you may want to take note of is these texture assignments can be saved and reloaded on multiple projects. So it's possible that the combination of colors that have been used and textures is something that you want to reload and not have to go through and make those changes or find those textures in the future. If you come in through File, and you come in through material file and save, you'll be able to actually come in and save the material assignment. So in this case, outdoor living will be the name of my material file. In the future, I can open up a new project, and if the walls were drawn with the same siding material or using the patio and so on, I would then be able to come in through File, Material File, and Load, and then load from my list of options that are there, the outdoor living. And so that's a great way to save changes and have them reapplied to get you up to speed quickly. Keep in mind, there are 10 chapters in all that take you through everything. And so from the simplicity of just simply sketching the outside perimeter of the walls to using the site plan mode to control the details separate from the floor plan and all of the different property options that come with that, the different decking options that were available, including the spindles, the glass, and so on, the use of custom walls and decking materials to create the outdoor kitchen area, and then even the importing of custom symbols when we didn't have a specific one that we wanted to use. Softplan's extensive libraries give us the ability to add thousands of detailed symbols to our model. And so that concludes our series on outdoor living with Softplan.